All right, Paladin time. Paladin has lost some fairly decent things from its repertoire with the rotation. Things like Keeper of Uldamon, for example, which were really strong. It does gain a lot of pretty good cards here, though. I feel so. I think that Paladin was decent going in. I think it had a good argument for being, say, the third best arena class, and I think that argument is maintained with the rotation of the cards. It loses a lot of good stuff. It gains a pretty good chunk of good stuff as well. Um, but it isn't. I think it's not doing as well as Mage does. I think again, Mage I feel just kind of improved upon improvements and was already the strongest class in Arena, and now it's gotten even better. I feel like a lot of the classes like Paladin have just kind of treaded water. And let's get into the cards, and because I'm not really prepared to do a long discussion of what cards left a class. I'm really kind of focusing more on the cards that entered the class. But yeah, I think that Paladin is still in a decent spot going forward. First off, adaptation. I don't think this is really worth a card. I think the effect is kind of interesting. If you give a creature poisonous, in a way, this is kind of like a 1-mana execute, right? You have a 1/1, you hit it into your opponent's creature, you play this spell, you kill their creature. Only you change the order a little bit. Other than that, though, I don't know. You can steal some game wins with like Wind Fury, but I don't know if I really want to spend 1 mana to give a creature Divine Shield, right? Do I want a Hand of Protection? I don't really know if I want to spend 1 mana to give a creature +3 attack. Do I want Blessing of Might, right? Like this card is a lot of other cards, but you don't have the reliability of getting those other cards. And I don't know. Like, I don't think there's really enough upside. I think this card is... I don't know. I've seen a lot of disagreement as whether or not this card is good or bad. I'm ultimately siding with bad. I just don't think this effect is worth a card. You have to have some sort of board state. You have to have some sort of board state that cares about these adaptations. You're also kind of stuck when you adapt a 1/1 and your options are things like Wind Fury, Taunt, and +3 health. You kind of didn't get what you needed, right? You kind of needed like +3 attack or poisonous, and then when you adapt a big minion, like something you've dino-sized, and we'll get into that in a second, you really want like Wind Fury, right? You want like to close out the game, or you want Divine Shield. Some of these things like Death Rattle, summon 2/1/1s are just not really that exciting. I think this card is a lot of variance, a lot of hit or miss. I think you want to avoid it. I think it's not a good card. And it's a common spell, so you're going to see it a lot. But I think the proper evaluation is that this card is just not very good, and you avoid it unless you have pressing reason to go into it. Dino Size, I like this card. I mean, there's very often 1/1s on the board for you, given that you're Paladin. To turn them into 10/10s, right? That's pretty amazing. You get your 8 mana 10/10 charge. With Adapt, you can make it a 10/10 Wind Fury, right? There's also some synergies with if you have a minion that has Taunt, or you have a minion that has Divine Shield, right? I think there's a lot of upside on this card. I think it's not hard to get that upside. I think a 10/10 for 8 mana is kind of where you want to be, or giving a Silverhand Recruit +9/+9 is really good. Kind of vulnerable to silence, but there aren't a lot of silences. Yeah, I like this card. I'm going to call it tier 1. I think I'm going to pick it more times than I pass on it. It's a spell, so I'm going to see it actually a decent chunk of the time. And I think this is just a good top end here. I mean, I think I think this card is very solid. I'm going to draft it most times that I see it, and I think you should too. Hydrologist. This card is... it can't be bad, right? It's not a bad card, because it's a 2/2 for 2 that generates extra value. That's sort of the formula for a card that you're going to want to play. Battlecry Discover a Secret, though, is really only useful in response to... Like, this card is good when your mage opponent plays a secret, because it not only gives you a cheap minion to toss out and have copied or turn into a 1/1 or whatever, right? It also gives you a secret, which will trigger steal their opponent's spell or counter spell or whatever, right? This guy's really good against mage secrets. I just don't like a lot of the Paladin secrets. I don't think they're very good. And so you're discovering secrets that aren't very good. There's no like Avenge in this meta, this format. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good card. It's still probably actually tier 1. but it's like near the bottom of tier 1. I more often than not want a more powerful card. I can think of a lot more powerful cards than this one, basically. But you're still going to draft him most times that you see him because 2/2 for 2 with value is sort of a formula for a good card. This is one of them. This is not. I think what's kind of frustrating is this card is like worse than Arcanologist, right? I almost feel like the stat lines for those two should be switched. That Arcanologist should be a 2/2 for 2, and this guy should be a 2/3 for 2, and then I would like him a lot more. Because discovering a secret in Paladin seems actually worse than drawing a secret from my deck as a mage. So, kind of inexplicably, this card just feels worse than Arcanologist. Anyways, it's fine though. You're going to draft this most of the time. Light Fuse Stegodon. I don't think this card is very good. If I adapt a single Silverhand Recruit, then he kind of gets his money's worth. But I really need to be adapting 2 before this guy really has a lot of upside. And I feel like a lot of the time I'm just going to play this guy on turn 4 with like no board, and it's just not going to feel good. I think you avoid this when you can. I don't think it's horrible, but I think a lot of times you're just experiencing the downside of this card, which is not really getting what you want to adapt off, right? You don't have the Silverhand Recruits to adapt in, and whatever. That said, Silverhand Recruits do have some pretty good adaptations. +3 attack or Poisonous are also both pretty good, but also Death Rattle summon 2 1/1s if you have a lot of Silverhand Recruits is pretty good. But I think the setup for this card is too much. There's not enough to really make this work, and so I'm going to pass on this most of the time. Lost in the Jungle. I will not pass on this most of the time. I think I will more often than not pick this card. I'm not sure if it's really tier 1. This is maybe more like top of tier 2. But I do think summoning 2 1/1s for 1 is a good rate. Obviously, this card is worse than Living Roots, which just has that added flexibility. But I guess not super obviously worse because they are Silverhand Recruits, which have some synergy. I think this card is good, though. I think this card is like a tier 2 type card. I think you're going to probably draft this more often than you pass it. And yeah, I mean, I think it's good enough even in a meta where they have a lot of things like Firefly, the 1/2 elemental that then generates another 1/2 elemental. There's some cards like that, right? That I'm not really super excited to run this into. But I still like this card. I think that it does a lot of work. I'm going to draft it. You're also going to see this a lot because it's a spell that's common. So the evaluation of this, again, kind of like Adapt, matters a lot because you're going to have the option to choose this a lot. I'm going to say tier 2-ish, right? I will pass on this card if given like a tier 1 card, something that is clearly better. But this is like, at very minimum, better than most of the filler stuff that I would see. I'm going to take this over any sort of like vanilla 2/3 or 3/2 very easily. And I think I'm going to take it over a lot of other stuff pretty easily as well. Primal Fin Champion, this card seems garbage. I don't care that he's a Murloc. I don't want to put pants on my guys. Yeah, I will pass on this guy. 2 mana 1/2 is just not where I want to be. This upside is just too hard to take advantage of in Arena. Yeah, not good. Spike Ridge Steed. This card is amazing. This card is just really, really good. You give a minion +2, +6, and taunt, which is really good. Also particularly important whenever you have one of these like poisonous creatures, right? If I play like a giant wasp and then I get to Spike Ridge Steed my giant wasp and it becomes a 4/8 poisonous taunt, that's good. So right off the bat, the buff is kind of where I want to be, I feel like. And then when it dies, I summon a 2/6 taunt. Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's really good. Giving something taunt plus death rattle is particularly relevant because it means that they need to trigger the death rattle before they can get to your face. I like that a lot. Yeah, I think this card is just amazing. I think this card is tier 1 very easily. Like, this is close to the top of tier 1. I'm not sure there are any rares that Paladin has that you'd want to take over this card, honestly. It's really, really good. Sunkeeper Tarim. Yeah, this card is amazing. Probably the best legendary you have access to. I mean, I don't know, Tyrion Ford Ring's up there, but like Latin, like Deathwing and whatnot. But this card is amazing. This card is really good. Taunt 3/7 for 6 is already not that bad of a rate. You know, it's not great, but the battle cry, set all the minions attack and health to 3. You turn everyone else into 3/3s which means just by himself, this guy trades with 3 of your opponent's creatures after this effect happens. Yeah, pretty insane. The fact that he's going to buff your creatures most of the time, or you can at least set up the board trade so that this guy buffs your creatures, also really good, right? A lot of times what will happen is just like you'll wipe your opponent's board just through regular combat, then you'll play this and all your damaged 1 health minions, all your 1/1s, all your whatever will become 3/3s, and suddenly you're just left with this glorious board. I mean, when this guy comes down on the battlefield and he buffs like two recruits to 3/3s, that's just so much game. I mean, that's a 6 mana, 4/11? No, sorry, 6 mana 7/11. Guy opens up a convenience store here. You won't hit that all the time, but like it's so good in so many board states because you can go after your opponent's creatures too. It's not just buffing your own creatures, which is going to happen a decent chunk of time. It's killing your opponent's creatures. I think this card is really strong, very good, tier 1 easily, one of the best legendaries you can get. Yeah, nothing much more to be said. Vine Cleaver. In a slower meta, this card is really good. 7 mana weapon, but every time your hero attacks, summon 2 1/1 Silverhand recruits. Yeah, I like this. I think this is solid. I think this is near like the bottom of tier 1. Maybe solidly tier 1 actually. It's not like top of tier 1 like some of these insane cards, but very good card actually. Lots of value. It is painful to be hitting something with this weapon all the time because once you've reached this sort of 7 mana stage of the game, you kind of start caring about your life total because it's been lowered a bit. Also, the things you're hitting are bigger. Yeah, there's some downside, but I don't know. At the end of the day, I can use this card to just deal 12 damage to my opponent's face and summon 6 Silverhand recruits for 7 mana. Like, my opponent needs to have taunt to force me to be hitting his creatures with this, right? Even if I just went face with this, I'd be perfectly fine with that. 12 damage for 7 mana, better than Pyroblast, and I'm summoning 6 dudes over the course of that, right? That's, I mean, in a sense, 12 mana worth of dudes, but not really, right? Like, I think it's good. I think this card is solid. I'm going to pick this most times that I see it. And so, there you have it for Paladin. Lots of really solid stuff, ultimately. Dino Size, I think this guy's pretty good. Lost in the Jungle, I'm going to count as pretty good. Probably not as good as, like, these two. This card is amazing. I think this card is really good. Spike Rich Steed. Sunkeeper Tarim is fantastic, and this card is also very good. So lots of good cards to replace some of the very good cards that it lost, right? Your Keeper of Uldamons and things of this sort. But, yeah, I think that given that Paladin was already pretty good in Arena, I think that even though it's lost some good stuff, it remains a pretty good class. There's enough stuff being added here that I still want to play Paladin a lot in Arena. So there you have it. There is Paladin, and on to the next class.